My hands were trembling when I held that box wrapped in shiny paper. It was Christmas. The living room was packed with relatives, the tree lights were blinking above our heads, and I had just received the worst gift of my life. Victoria, my daughter-in-law, had handed me a cooking apron in front of everyone. It was a cheap apron, the kind they sell at the dollar store or a discount bin for $5. The fabric was rough, a dirty gray color, with ridiculous ruffles on the edges. Everyone was staring. Some smiled uncomfortably. Others looked away. And then my son, Jason, my only son, the boy I raised alone after his father died, burst out laughing. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was an open, clear, cruel guffaw. "Perfect, Mom," he said, wiping a tear of laughter from his eye. "You are going to need it to serve us Sunday dinner." Victoria clapped as if Jason had said something witty. I felt the floor opening up beneath my feet. I felt the air turning thick, unbreathable. I swallowed my tears with such force that my throat hurt. I stood up in silence. Nobody expected what I was about to do. I walked toward the tree with my legs shaking, picked up the large box I had left there earlier, and placed it in front of them. My voice came out steady, even though inside I was crumbling. "Now, open my gift to you." Victoria ripped off the paper with that fake smile she always wore. Jason helped her open the box, and when they saw what was inside, when they understood what it meant, their faces transformed. But to understand how we got here, I need to tell you the whole story. It all started 3 years ago, when I buried my husband. Arthur had been the love of my life for 40 years. He worked as a mechanic until his very last day, always with hands stained with grease, always with that tired smile but full of love. He left us a small but paid-off house in a humble but decent neighborhood in the suburbs. That house was everything we had. It was the fruit of 40 years of sacrifice, of sleepless nights, of meager meals so that Jason could go to college. I worked cleaning offices for 20 years to help with the bills. My knees were destroyed. My back was never the same, but it was worth it. Jason became an accountant, got a good job, and I thought we could finally rest. I thought the sacrifices were over. How wrong I was. Jason met Victoria at a business conference downtown. She came from a family with money, the kind that lives in gated communities with huge lawns and imported cars. She wore designer clothes, spoke with that refined accent that only people who never had to worry about paying a utility bill have. The first time she came to my house, I noticed how she looked at everything. Her eyes scanned the walls with peeling paint, the old furniture that Arthur and I had bought secondhand, the curtains faded by the sun. She said nothing, but her expression said it all. Contempt, disgust, pity. Jason was so in love he did not see anything. Or maybe he did see, but he had decided to ignore it. When he hugged me that day, he whispered in my ear, "Mom, she is different. You will see." And I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that my son had found true love. The wedding was elegant, expensive, in a ballroom that cost more than what Arthur earned in an entire year. Victoria insisted that I wear a dress she chose, a beige dress that made me look like a shadow among all the guests in their elegant attire. "It is understated, perfect for you," she told me with that smile I still did not know how to decipher. During the reception, they sat me at a table in the back, far from the head table where the bride and groom and Victoria's family were. When I asked Jason why, he told me it was protocol, that this was how elegant weddings were done. I swallowed my pride and smiled for the photos. I clapped when they cut the cake. I cried when they danced their first dance. But something inside me was already starting to break. The first few months were subtle. Victoria began visiting my house less frequently. When she came, she always found excuses not to stay long. "We have a dinner reservation, Jason has work, traffic on the interstate is terrible." Jason's calls became shorter, more spaced out. When I called, Victoria answered and said Jason was busy, that he would call me back later. But the calls never came. On Christmas of that first year, they gave me a blender, a generic blender that cost $20. I had given them $2,000 in cash so they could start their life together. I said nothing. I smiled and said, "Thank you," because that is what mothers do, right? We swallow it, we endure, we forgive. Then came the day that changed everything. Jason appeared at my door on a Tuesday afternoon, without warning. He had dark circles under his eyes. He looked tired, nervous. "Mom, I need to talk to you," he said. I brewed coffee. We sat at the kitchen table where we had talked so many times when he was a boy, and I waited. "Victoria and I want to buy a bigger house," he began, without looking me in the eyes. "But we need money for the down payment. I have been thinking and, well, this house has value, Mom. If you sell it, you could give us that money and come live with us. It would be perfect. You would be in a better house, with all the amenities, and we would have the house we need to start our family." I felt as if they had thrown ice water on me. "Sell your father's house?" I asked. "The house where you grew up?" Jason rubbed his face with his hands. "Dad is gone, Mom, and you do not need all this space. You would be better off with us. Victoria already has everything planned. You would have your own room. You would not have to worry about anything." But something in his voice did not sound convincing. Something in his words sounded rehearsed, as if he had repeated them in front of a mirror until he memorized them. I spent 3 nights without sleep thinking about Jason's proposal. I would wake up at 3 in the morning, walk through the house, touching the walls, remembering. Here Arthur had painted when we were expecting Jason. There Jason had taken his first steps. In that corner, we had put the Christmas tree for 30 years. Every nook held a memory, a piece of my life, a piece of my heart. But Jason was my son, my only son. And if selling the house meant being close to him, if it meant helping him build his future, maybe the sacrifice was worth it. Maybe this was my last chance to be useful, to show him that a mother is always there. I called Jason on Friday morning. "All right," I told him. "I will sell the house." I heard his sigh of relief on the other end of the line. "Thank you, Mom. You will not regret it, I promise. You will live like a queen with us, a queen." That word would remain etched in my mind as a cruel mockery. The selling process was fast, too fast. Victoria knew a real estate agent who had a buyer in 3 weeks. The house sold for $300,000. It was not a fortune in today's market, but it was everything Arthur and I had built. The day I signed the papers, I cried in the bathroom of the title company office. I cried for Arthur, for all those years, for the house that would no longer be mine. When I walked out, Victoria was waiting for me in the car with that perfect smile. "You will see, Margaret, this is the best for everyone. Jason and I have already started looking for the perfect house. It will be beautiful, with a garden, with a pool. You are going to be so comfortable." I nodded, wiping my tears. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. I moved into Jason and Victoria's house 2 weeks later. It was a nice house. I could not deny that. 2 stories, modern kitchen, elegant furniture. But when Victoria showed me my room, I felt something break inside me. It was a small room at the back of the house, next to the laundry room. A simple twin bed, a tiny closet, a window that looked out onto the alley. "It is temporary," Victoria explained, "until we find the new house. There you will have a beautiful room, with a private bathroom and everything." Jason was standing behind her, silent, looking at the floor. I wanted to ask him why he said nothing, why he allowed this, but I swallowed the words. I arranged my few belongings in that room that smelled of detergent and closed the door. The first week was strange, but tolerable. I tried to be useful, make breakfast, clean a little. Victoria always thanked me with that smile that never reached her eyes. "How sweet, Margaret. But you do not have to do anything. Rest." However, the second week everything changed. Victoria started leaving me lists in the kitchen. "Things to do today," the paper said. "Do the laundry, iron Jason's shirts, clean the bathrooms, prepare dinner." At first, I thought it was temporary, that maybe she was busy with work. But the lists became longer, more demanding. Wash the windows, clean the oven, dust all the furniture. I was 66 years old. My knees hurt, my back protested with every movement. But I did it. I did it because I thought it was my way of paying for being there. Because I thought this way I was helping my son. One day, Victoria invited her friends over for tea. I was in the kitchen preparing the snacks when one of them came in looking for the bathroom. She saw me with the apron on, my hands covered in flour, and asked, "Are you the new housekeeper?" Before I could answer, Victoria appeared behind her. "Oh, no, she is Jason's mom. She lives with us and she loves to cook. Right, Margaret? The way she said it, with that poisonous sweetness, made me feel small, invisible, insignificant. I nodded and went back to my snacks while I heard their laughter in the living room. That night, when Jason arrived from work, I tried to talk to him. Son, I need us to talk. He loosened his tie, tired. What is it, Mom? I did not know how to say it without sounding ungrateful, without sounding like a complaining old woman. It is just that. I feel like I am doing too much work around the house. I thought I sold my house to be with you, not to be the maid. Jason sighed, annoyed. Mom, nobody is forcing you to do anything. If you want to help with the house, great. But do not come complaining later. Victoria works all day. I work all day. Is it too much to ask that you help a little? His words fell on me like stones. Help a little. As if cleaning the entire house, cooking 3 meals a day, washing and ironing were not enough. But the worst had not happened yet. One night, 2 months after moving in, I heard voices in Jason's home office. The door was ajar, and I recognized Victoria's voice, furious. It has been 2 months, and you still have not talked to the architect. We need to start construction on our house. Your mother gave us $300,000, Jason. It is more than enough for the down payment. My heart stopped. $300,000. I had given all the money to Jason the day after the sale was finalized. He told me he would put it in a special account, that he would invest it wisely for the new house. I moved closer to the door, holding my breath. Jason replied with a tired voice. Victoria, I already told you the money is invested. It needs time to grow. She let out a sarcastic laugh. Invested? In what? Because as far as I know, we have not seen a single cent of profit. And meanwhile, your mother is here, living for free, eating our food, using our utilities. It is the least she can do. Help with the housework. I felt the world stop. Living for free, as if my $300,000 meant nothing. As if 40 years of sacrifice were invisible. That night I could not sleep. I stared at the ceiling of that small, cold room, wondering at what moment I had lost my son. At what moment Jason, the boy who cried in my arms when he had nightmares, had become this man who allowed his wife to treat me like garbage. The next day, Victoria handed me another list. This time, it was longer than ever. And at the end, there was a note. Please, when you finish with this, serve dinner at 8 o'clock sharp. Jason and I have important guests. She did not sign with her name. She did not put a genuine please. It was an order, direct and clear. I took the list with trembling hands and went to the kitchen. While I peeled potatoes, while I chopped vegetables, while my tears fell on the cutting board, I knew something had to change. I could not keep living like this. I could not keep being invisible in my own son's life. The guests arrived at 8 o'clock sharp. They were colleagues of Victoria, elegant people with expensive clothes and perfumes that left an intense trail throughout the house. I had spent 4 hours cooking, preparing a menu that Victoria had dictated to me that morning. Shrimp appetizer, gourmet salad, stuffed chicken with wine sauce, and chocolate dessert. My feet were killing me. My hands smelled of garlic and onion. But everything was ready. I set the table with the fine china Victoria kept for special occasions, folded the napkins as she had taught me, lit the candles. When I finished, I retreated to the kitchen, expecting them to call me to serve. And they called me. Again and again. Margaret, more water. Margaret, the sauce is cold. Margaret, we need bread. Every time I entered the dining room, I felt their stares. Some were of pity, others of curiosity. But the worst was Victoria's, a triumphant look, as if she were exhibiting me, as if she were proving to her friends that she had the power, the control, the authority in that house. Jason said nothing. He ate in silence, nodded when someone spoke, but never looked me in the eyes. When the guests finally left, it was almost 11 at night. The kitchen was a disaster. Dirty plates piled in the sink, pots with stuck food, the floor stained with sauce. I leaned against the table, feeling my legs giving out. Victoria walked in with 2 empty wine glasses and left them next to the other dishes. Everything was delicious, Margaret. My friends were impressed. Although next time, try to serve faster. There were awkward moments of waiting. She did not wait for my answer. She simply walked out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with the mess. I looked at the clock. I looked at the dishes. I looked at my wrinkled hands, reddened by the hot water and detergent. And for the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel the rage, a deep, ancient rage, coming from a place I had kept locked for too long. It was not fair. None of this was fair. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. Well, not exactly a plan, but a certainty. I needed help. I needed to talk to someone who could see the situation from the outside, someone not blinded by a son's love or the manipulation of a calculating daughter-in-law. I remembered Samantha. Samantha had been my neighbor for 15 years before she moved to the city center. She was a lawyer, a smart and direct woman who had always treated me with respect and affection. We had drifted apart a bit after her move, but we were still in touch. I sent her a message asking if we could meet. She replied in less than an hour. "Of course, Margaret. Is everything okay? Come to my office tomorrow at 3. That night, I told Victoria I had a doctor's appointment. It was not entirely a lie. My mental health was deteriorating, and that counts as something medical, does it not? Samantha's office was in a modern building downtown. When I entered, she welcomed me with a strong, genuine hug. "Margaret, how long has it been? You look different," she realized immediately. Samantha had always been perceptive. We sat in her private office, and I told her everything, every detail. The sale of the house, the tiny room, the endless lists, the hurtful comments, the dinner with the guests. I spoke nonstop for almost an hour. And for the first time in months, someone truly listened to me. When I finished, Samantha had a frown, and her lips were pressed tight. "Margaret, this is abuse. Financial and emotional abuse. Your daughter-in-law manipulated you into selling your assets and is now exploiting you to your face." I shook my head. "No, it is my son. Jason would not allow that." Samantha leaned forward, staring at me. "Are you sure? Because from what you are telling me, Jason is complicit in all of this. Whether out of weakness or convenience, he is allowing this to happen." Her words hurt me, but deep down I knew she was right. Samantha took a notepad and started asking specific questions. "Do you have any documents regarding the sale of your house?" "Yes, I had copies." "Do you have proof that you gave the money to Jason?" "I made a bank transfer, so yes." "Did he make you sign anything when you moved in with them? Any agreement? Contract?" "No, nothing. Everything had been verbal. Promises in the air that now vanished like smoke." Samantha nodded while writing. "Good. I need you to bring me all those documents. I also need you to start documenting everything they make you do in that house. Schedules, chores, any humiliating comments. Take photos of the room where you sleep. Record conversations, if you can do it without being discovered." I looked at her, scared. "Recording? Is that not illegal?" She shook her head. "In this state, you can record conversations in which you participate. It is legal and can be important evidence." I left that office feeling two contradictory things: hope and terror. Hope because finally someone was taking me seriously. Terror because I was about to do something that would change everything forever. During the next 3 weeks, I became a spy in my own life. I carried my phone in my apron pocket, always recording. I documented every list Victoria left me. I took photos of my room, of the chores I did, of the clock marking the hours I spent cleaning, cooking, serving. I heard conversations that broke my soul. One night, I recorded Victoria talking on the phone with her mother. "Yes, Mom, I have her here doing all the housework. She is perfect, she does not complain, and I do not have to pay her anything. Besides, with the $300,000 she gave us, Jason already invested in that business I told you about. If it goes well, we will be able to buy the house in the gated community we always wanted." My blood froze. The money was not saved for a house where I would live with them. It was invested in a business I knew nothing about. Everything had been a lie from the beginning. I took all the evidence to Samantha. She spent over 2 hours reviewing the documents, listening to the recordings, looking at the photos. When she finished, she looked up with a serious expression. "Margaret, this is worse than I thought. Your daughter-in-law scammed you, and your son is an accomplice, whether consciously or unconsciously. Legally, that money was yours. They promised you decent housing in exchange and have you practically as an unpaid domestic servant. Furthermore, there are indications that they might have used your money for purposes they did not consult you on and that do not benefit you. I felt tears starting to well up. What can I do? Samantha took my hands. We can do several things. First, I can send them a legal letter demanding they return the money or fulfill what was promised adequately. Second, we can initiate a legal process for elder financial abuse. Third, and this is important, you need to get out of that house. It is not safe for you, neither physically nor emotionally. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. I want them to pay, I said with a voice I did not recognize as mine. I want them to feel even a fraction of what they made me feel. Samantha smiled, and there was something of admiration in that smile. Then we are going to need a more elaborate plan. Samantha explained that she had a colleague, a private investigator, who specialized in financial fraud cases. His name is Robert, she told me, and he is very good at what he does. If there is something shady in Victoria and Jason's finances, he will find it. I accepted without hesitation. At this point, I had nothing left to lose. Robert turned out to be a man of about 50, serious but kind, with a way of speaking that inspired confidence. The three of us met in Samantha's office on a Tuesday afternoon. I had lied again, telling Victoria I had another medical appointment. She barely looked up from her phone when I told her. Fine, but do not forget I need you to prepare a special dinner tomorrow. Jason is bringing his boss. Of course, because that was the only thing that mattered. Her dinners, her impressions, her perfect life built on my ruins. Robert took notes while I repeated the whole story again. I gave him the bank details, the dates, the amounts. I told him about the promise of the new house, about the tiny room, about everything. When I finished, he closed his notebook and looked at me seriously. Mrs. Margaret, I am going to be honest with you. These types of cases are more common than people think. Children who manipulate their aging parents to obtain property or money, promising care that never arrives. The good news is that you have documentation. The bad news is that your son is involved, and that always complicates things emotionally. I swallowed hard. I just want to recover my dignity, and if possible, my money. Robert nodded. I am going to investigate your daughter-in-law and your son's finances thoroughly. If that money was used fraudulently, we are going to find out. I need you to give me a few days. I gave him all the information I had and left that meeting feeling something I had not felt in months. Power. A small power, fragile like a flame in the wind, but power nonetheless. Meanwhile, life in the house became increasingly unbearable. Victoria had started inviting her friends more frequently, and it was always the same. I cooked, served, cleaned, while they laughed and chatted about their perfect lives. One afternoon, one of her friends commented, "Victoria, how lucky you are to have help at home. I pay $800 a month for my cleaning lady, and she does not even cook that well." Victoria laughed. "Well, let us just say I have a very convenient arrangement." Everyone laughed. I was standing next to the table, holding a tray of cookies, feeling like just another piece of furniture, invisible but useful. When they left, I sat in the kitchen and cried with my face in my hands. How had I arrived here? How had I allowed my life to become this? A week later, Robert called me. His voice sounded strange, as if he had discovered something even he did not expect. "Mrs. Margaret, I need you to come to Samantha's office tomorrow. It is urgent." My heart was beating so fast I thought it would pop out of my chest. The next day, when I entered the office, Robert had several documents scattered on the table. Samantha was by his side, with a tense expression. "Sit down, Margaret," said Samantha. I sat down, preparing for the worst. Robert began to speak. "I have investigated Victoria and Jason's finances, and what I found is disturbing." He opened a folder and showed me several papers. "Your money, the $300,000 from the sale of your house, was transferred to an account in Victoria's name. Jason signed the authorization, but the account is hers alone. Of those $300,000, Victoria transferred $250,000 to an investment in a real estate business. Up to there, it could be legitimate. But here comes the interesting part." Robert slid another document toward me. I found that Victoria has a history. Before marrying Jason, she was engaged to another man. She also convinced that man's mother to sell her property to invest together. The lady never saw her money back. The engagement was broken mysteriously 6 months later, and Victoria disappeared with the money. There was no police report because the lady had advanced dementia and died shortly after. But the financial records are there. I felt the room spinning. Are you saying my daughter-in-law is a professional con artist? Samantha took my hand. We are saying there is a pattern, and that pattern suggests this is not the first time Victoria has done something like this. The question is, does Jason know? Is he an accomplice, or is he another victim? I did not know how to answer. Part of me wanted to believe my son was innocent, that he was being manipulated just like me. But another part, the part that had heard those conversations, that had seen his indifference to my suffering, knew that even if he was not the mastermind, he was definitely complicit. Robert continued, there is more. That real estate business where they invested your money is a company that is being investigated for fraudulent practices. They promise returns of 20% in 6 months, something that is practically impossible in the current market. There are at least 15 people who have filed complaints saying they cannot recover their money. It is very likely a Ponzi scheme. I closed my eyes, feeling everything crumbling. My money, the fruit of 40 years of honest work, was lost in a scam. And my son, my own son, had allowed this to happen. What can I do? I asked with a trembling voice. Samantha cleared her throat. Legally, we can do several things. First, file a civil lawsuit against Victoria and Jason for fraud and misappropriation. Second, alert the authorities about the real estate company so they investigate. Third, and this is going to hurt, we can press criminal charges for elder financial abuse. In this state, that can lead to prison. The word prison resonated in my head like a gong. Was I really willing to send my own son to jail? Samantha must have noticed my expression because she added, You do not have to decide everything now. But you need to protect yourself, Margaret. You need to get out of that house, and you need to secure your future. I have contacts in social services. We can get you a temporary place while we resolve this. I shook my head. I do not want charity. I have had enough of feeling like a burden. Robert intervened. It would not be charity. It would be a temporary shelter while you recover what is yours. I thought about it for a moment that seemed eternal. Finally, I nodded. All right, but before I go, I want them to know. I want them to understand what they did. Samantha and Robert exchanged glances. What do you have in mind? Samantha asked. An idea had begun to form in my head, dark and perfect. Christmas is coming, I said slowly. Victoria always hosts a big Christmas dinner. She invites all her family and friends. It is her moment to shine, to show off her perfect life. I paused, feeling something new growing inside me. Determination, justice, controlled rage. I want to unmask her there, in front of everyone. I want her perfect world to crumble the same way she crumbled mine. Samantha smiled, and there was something savage in that smile. That can be done. But we have to plan it well, and we need you to be prepared for the consequences. Once we open that box, there is no turning back. I looked at my hands. Those hands that had worked for decades, that had raised a son, that had cooked thousands of meals, that had cleaned other people's houses to give a better life to my family. Those hands that now trembled not from fear, but from anticipation. I do not want to turn back, I said with a firmness that surprised myself. I want justice, and I want it in front of everyone. The following days were the hardest of my life. I had to keep acting as if nothing was happening, keep cleaning, cooking, serving, while inside I burned with a mixture of rage and determination. Every time Victoria left me a list of chores, I smiled and nodded. Every time Jason came home from work and did not even ask me how I was, I swallowed the pain and kept going. But now it was different. Now I had a purpose. Now I knew that every humiliation, every hurtful comment, every moment of invisibility had an expiration date, and that date was Christmas. Samantha and Robert worked tirelessly during those weeks. Robert finished his investigation and gathered all possible evidence: bank transfers, emails between Victoria and her partners in the fraudulent business, testimonies from other victims, Victoria's complete history with her ex-fiancé and his mother. It was overwhelming. Samantha, for her part, prepared all the legal documents, civil lawsuits, reports for the authorities, even a protection order for me in case things got violent. "We cannot predict how Victoria is going to react when we confront her," Samantha warned me. "People like that, when they feel cornered, can become unpredictable." I nodded. But at that moment nothing scared me more than continuing to live in that lie. Victoria announced the Christmas dinner 3 weeks in advance. As always, it would be a big event. Her family, some select friends, important colleagues. "This year will be special," she told me with that fake smile. "So I need everything to be perfect, Margaret. We are going to have more than 20 people. I already prepared the menu and the shopping list for you." She handed me several papers full of detailed instructions: roasted chicken, stuffed turkey, 3 types of salads, varied appetizers, elaborate desserts. It was work for 3 people, but she expected me to do it alone. "Of course," I said meekly. "Everything will be perfect." And it would be, but not in the way she expected. Samantha helped me get a small apartment through a housing program for seniors. It was modest, a studio in a clean and safe building, but it was mine. I signed the lease a week before Christmas and started moving my few belongings in secret every time Victoria and Jason went out. I did not have much, barely clothes and some personal objects, but every box I took out of that house felt like recovering a piece of my soul. The apartment had the basics: a bed, a small kitchenette, a bathroom. But it had something the room in Jason's house never had: dignity. It was small, yes, but it was a space where I did not have to serve anyone, where I could close the door and simply be me. Robert visited me 2 days before Christmas with important news. "Mrs. Margaret, I have information you need to hear." We sat in my new apartment, at that small table I had bought second-hand. "The company where Victoria invested your money officially collapsed yesterday. The authorities arrested the owners for fraud. There are over 100 victims, and the total amount scammed exceeds $3 million. I felt my blood freeze. "So my money is lost?" Robert shook his head. "Not necessarily. When there are cases like this, the government sometimes recovers assets and distributes them among the victims. It can take years, but there is hope. Furthermore, Victoria and Jason can be considered accomplices if the authorities determine they knew it was fraudulent. That would make them legally liable to you." I rubbed my face with my hands. "And you think they knew?" Robert pulled out more documents. I found emails between Victoria and one of the scammers. In them, they discuss how the business is risky but lucrative and how old people are easier to convince. She knew exactly what she was doing. The rage I felt in that moment was different from everything before. It was not the hot, impulsive rage that surges and dies out. It was something cold, calculated, relentless. My daughter-in-law had not only stolen my money. She had seen me as easy prey, as a stupid old woman who could be manipulated and discarded. And Jason, my son, had allowed all this. Whether out of weakness, greed, or indifference, he had chosen Victoria over me. That truth hurt more than all the lost money. "I want her to pay," I said with a firm voice. "I want her and all her fancy friends to know exactly who she is." Robert nodded. "The plan is still on then. The Christmas dinner will be her moment. Samantha already prepared copies of all the documents. We are going to put them in gift boxes, as we discussed. They will find out in front of everyone." He did not finish the sentence, but there was no need. We both knew what was going to happen. Christmas Eve arrived. I got up early in my new apartment, dressed in simple but dignified clothes, and returned to Jason's house for the last time. Victoria was hysterical, running from one side to another, shouting orders. "Margaret, thank God you arrived. We have 1,000 things to do. People arrive at 7, and nothing is ready." I nodded submissively. "Do not worry, Victoria. Everything will be perfect." And I meant it. I spent the day cooking. The smell of spices and roasted meat filled the house. The table looked beautiful, decorated with candles and flowers Victoria had bought. Everything was impeccable, just as she had demanded. But in the car, parked 2 streets away, Samantha was waiting with the special boxes. The boxes that would change everything. The guests began to arrive at 7. Victoria's family, elegant and uptight as always. Some of Jason's friends from work. A couple of important neighbors. All dressed in expensive clothes, all smiling those perfect smiles of people who have never had to worry about money. I served the appetizers, filled the wine glasses, cleared the empty plates. Invisible, as always. I listened to their superficial conversations, their fake laughter, their comments about how beautiful the house looked, how delicious the food was. None asked who had cooked. None asked who had cleaned for hours so that everything would shine. I was a ghost who served and disappeared. After dinner, Victoria announced it was time to exchange gifts. Everyone moved to the living room, where the Christmas tree shone with lights and expensive ornaments. There was a mountain of gifts underneath, all wrapped in elegant paper. Victoria began distributing them, reading the names aloud, enjoying the show. And then came my turn. She called me to the center of the room, as if I were part of the entertainment. "Margaret, this is for you." She handed me a small box wrapped in silver paper. Everyone was watching. I opened the gift slowly, feeling their eyes on me. It was an apron. A cheap cooking apron, the kind they sell at the supermarket for $3. The fabric was rough, a dirty gray color, with ridiculous ruffles on the edges. I heard some uncomfortable murmurs among the guests. Victoria was smiling, expecting my reaction of submissive gratitude as always. But then Jason spoke. My son, my only son, burst out laughing. A loud, cruel laugh that cut the air like a knife. "Perfect, Mom," he said, wiping a tear of laughter from his eye. "You are going to need it to serve us Sunday dinner." Victoria clapped, proud of her husband. Some guests laughed nervously. Others looked at the floor, uncomfortable. And I stayed there standing, holding that miserable apron, feeling how something inside me broke and rebuilt itself at the same time. I swallowed the tears with such force that my throat hurt. The tears wanted to come out, but I refused to give them that satisfaction. I stood up in silence. The room went silent too, expectant. I walked toward the tree with my legs trembling but firm. I took 2 large boxes I had placed there that morning, before the guests arrived. Boxes Samantha had given me. Boxes wrapped in beautiful gold paper, which seemed to contain something wonderful. I placed the 2 large boxes in front of Victoria and Jason. My voice came out steady, although inside I felt like I was crumbling and rebuilding myself simultaneously. "Now, open my gift to you." Victoria looked at Jason with a confused smile. She probably expected something insignificant, something they could ridicule later when I was not present. Jason shrugged and began opening his box. Victoria did the same with hers. The gold paper fell to the floor. They opened the lids, and what they saw inside made their faces transform completely. Victoria's smile vanished like ice under the sun. Jason went pale, so pale I thought he was going to faint. Inside each box were documents, many documents, organized in folders with clear labels. Victoria pulled one out with trembling hands and began to read. It was Robert's investigation report, complete with her history, the case of her ex-fiancé, the mother with dementia, the money she never returned. Jason pulled another document from his box. It was the analysis of the bank transfers, showing exactly how my $300,000 had been moved from account to account until ending up in that fraudulent investment. There were also copies of the emails between Victoria and the scammers, where she discussed how elderly people were easy targets. At the bottom of each box, there was something else, a court summons. Victoria and Jason were being sued for fraud, misappropriation, and elder financial abuse. The silence in the room was deafening. All the guests looked at the boxes, trying to understand what was happening. Victoria's mother walked over and took one of the documents. She began to read, and her face contorted in horror. "Victoria, what is this? What does all this mean?" Victoria tried to snatch the paper from her. "Mom, it is not what it looks like. This is a mistake." But her voice sounded desperate, guilty. Jason remained seated, looking at the documents as if he could not process what he was seeing. "Mom," he finally said with a hoarse voice, "what did you do?" I laughed. It was a bitter, tired laugh, full of months of contained pain. "What did I do? Are you seriously asking me that, Jason? What I did? was trust you. What I did was sell the house your father and I built over 40 years because you promised me a home. What I did was hand you every cent we had because I believed in your word. My voice grew stronger, clearer. All the guests were listening now, completely attentive. What I did was clean this house from top to bottom every day while you treated me like an employee. What I did was cook for your fancy parties while you did not even let me sit at the table. What I did was sleep in a room the size of a closet while my $300,000 disappeared into fraudulent investments. I pointed to the boxes. And what I did, finally, was hire a lawyer and an investigator to discover the truth. The truth that is there, in those documents, for everyone to see. A friend of Jason, a colleague from work, took one of the papers and began to read. His expression changed from curiosity to shock. Jason, this says your wife has a history of fraud, that she did the same thing to another family? Other guests began taking documents, passing them among themselves, reading aloud fragments that left them open-mouthed. Victoria jumped to her feet. Her face, usually composed and perfect, was red with fury. This is private. You have no right to look at this. Margaret, you are defaming me. This is illegal. Samantha chose that moment to enter the room. She had been waiting outside, as we had planned, ready to intervene when necessary. Actually, said Samantha with a professional and cold voice, everything in those boxes is public information or evidence obtained legally. I am Mrs. Margaret's attorney, and I can assure you that every document here has been verified and authenticated. Victoria looked at her with pure hate. And who the hell are you? Samantha handed her her business card. Samantha Miller, attorney specializing in financial abuse cases. And I am here to ensure that Mrs. Margaret recovers what is hers, and that you face the consequences of your actions. Victoria's mother dropped the papers she held in her hands. She put a hand to her chest, breathing with difficulty. Victoria Marie Reynolds, is this true? Did you steal money from your husband's mother? Victoria denied frantically. No, Mom, it is not like that. She misunderstood everything. I was going to invest her money so it would grow, so she would have more in the future. Samantha pulled more documents from her briefcase. Then why in these emails do you tell Mr. Martinez, who is now in federal custody, that Mrs. Margaret will never find out about the risks because she is too trusting? Why in this other communication do you celebrate that I finally got the funds from the old lady and now we can proceed with phase 2? The silence that followed was crushing. Victoria opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked for support from Jason, but my son was paralyzed, looking at the documents as if they were poisonous snakes. One of the neighbors, an older man who had always been kind to me, stood up. Mrs. Margaret, is it true that you slept in the utility room? I nodded. It is true. I can show you if you like. The man looked at Jason with disgust. Jason, I have known your mother for years. She is an honest, hard-working woman. How could you allow this? Jason finally reacted. He stood up, letting documents fall to the floor. I did not know. I did not know any of this. He pointed at Victoria. She handled the finances. I just signed where she told me. Samantha intervened again. Mr. Jason, your signature is on the transfer authorizations. Your name appears on the investment contracts. Legally, you are just as responsible as your wife, whether you knew the details or not. Jason turned to Victoria with eyes full of fury and betrayal. What did you do, Victoria? What the hell did you do? Victoria tried to regain her composure, but it was too late. Her perfect mask had cracked completely. I tried to help. I tried to make that money grow for all of us. It is not my fault the investment went wrong. Samantha smiled humorlessly. The investment did not go wrong. It was a fraud from the beginning. A Ponzi scheme that was being investigated by the authorities even before you put Mrs. Margaret's money in. And according to these emails, you knew. Victoria's sister, who had been quiet until that moment, stood up and walked toward the door. I cannot be here. I cannot be part of this. Other guests began to do the same, murmuring apologies, avoiding looking at Victoria and Jason. The perfect Christmas dinner was crumbling, and I felt a mixture of triumph and sadness watching their world collapse. Victoria's father, a serious man who had been a judge before retiring, took the document with his daughter's history. He read in silence for several minutes, while everyone waited. Finally, he looked up and looked at Victoria with a mixture of disappointment and pain that I knew very well. It was the same expression that had probably been on my face for months. "Did you also deceive Mrs. Martinez, your ex-fiancé's mother?" Victoria began to cry, but they were tears of frustration, not regret. It was different. She was sick. She did not know what she was doing. Her father raised a hand, interrupting her. "Enough. I do not want to hear any more." He turned to me. "Mrs. Margaret, on behalf of my family, I offer my most sincere apologies. If there is anything we can do to remedy this," I shook my head. "The only thing I want is justice, and for your daughter to understand that elderly people are not objects that can be used and discarded." Jason was still standing, motionless, looking at Victoria as if he were seeing her for the first time. "You said the money was safe. You said it was in a special savings account." Victoria wiped her tears, and for a moment I saw a flash of the real person behind the mask. Cold, calculating, without real remorse. The money was going to multiply. We were going to be rich, Jason. We were going to have the house of our dreams, the cars you always wanted, everything. But I needed that initial capital. Jason recoiled as if she had hit him. "You used my mother? You used me?" Victoria did not answer, and that silence was more revealing than any confession. I looked at my son, at that man who had been my baby, my boy, my reason for living for so many years, and I saw something I never thought I would see. I saw him realize that he had failed, that he had chosen wrong, that he had allowed his mother to be humiliated and exploited because it was easier than facing the truth. The room had emptied almost completely. Only Victoria's father and mother, Samantha, Jason, Victoria, and I, remained. The Christmas tree kept blinking with its cheerful lights, completely oblivious to the human disaster unfolding beneath its branches. The plates of food were getting cold in the dining room, forgotten. All that effort, all that perfection Victoria had demanded, now meant nothing. Victoria's mother cried silently on the sofa, her face in her hands. Her father remained standing, rigid, with that judge's expression he had probably perfected over decades in court. Jason slumped into a chair, head in his hands, breathing raggedly. And Victoria stared out the window as if she wanted to disappear, as if she could escape all this simply by ignoring it. Samantha broke the silence. "Mrs. Victoria, Mr. Jason, in addition to the civil lawsuit, I have filed a formal report with the district attorney's office. Given that there is evidence of a pattern of fraud, and considering the victim is an elderly person, this is considered a felony in this state. The authorities are going to investigate, and they will most likely press criminal charges." Victoria's mother let out a whimper. "Jail? Are you saying my daughter could go to jail?" Samantha nodded. "Depending on what the DA determines, yes, fraud against the elderly carries sentences of up to 10 years in this state. And if they find more victims, if they discover more cases like Mrs. Martinez's, the consequences could be even more severe." Victoria finally reacted. She turned to me with desperate eyes. "Margaret, please, it does not have to go that far. We can fix this. I will pay back the money, I swear. I just need time." Samantha intervened before I could answer. "The money you invested in that fraudulent company is frozen by federal order. It is part of a larger criminal investigation. Even if you wanted to return the funds, you cannot access them right now." Jason raised his head. "What? All the money is frozen?" Robert, who had entered discreetly during the chaos, nodded. "The company where you invested was a Ponzi scheme involving over 100 victims and $3 million. The owners were arrested 3 days ago. All assets are under federal control while they process the case. It can take years to resolve this, and there is no guarantee the victims will recover more than 30 or 40% of their investment." Jason jumped to his feet. 30%? Are you saying we lost almost all of my mother's money? Reality finally hit him with full force. Victoria tried to approach me, but Samantha stepped in subtly. "Mrs. Margaret, listen to me. I can get the money. My family has resources. We can pay you what you lost, plus interest. I just need you to withdraw the lawsuit, not to press criminal charges." I stared at her, seeing through her desperation. The same way you were going to pay back Mrs. Martinez? The same way you promised me a decent room in a new house that never existed? Victoria paled. That was different. Mrs. Martinez was sick. She did not. Her father interrupted her with a cutting voice. Shut up, Victoria. Every word you say sinks you deeper. He turned to me. Mrs. Margaret, my daughter has committed unforgivable acts. If you decide to proceed with criminal charges, I am not going to interfere. In fact, I am going to make sure she faces the consequences of her actions. I have spent 30 years in the judicial system defending the law, and I am not going to start violating it now to protect someone who clearly has no morals or ethics, even if she is my own daughter. Her father's words seemed to hit Victoria harder than everything else. She staggered back, looking for support from Jason, but he pulled away from her. Do not touch me, said my son with a trembling voice. I cannot even look at you right now. Victoria began to sob for real, genuine tears of someone who finally understands they have lost everything. Jason, please, I did it for us, for our future. It was going to work, the money was going to multiply, and we were all going to benefit. Jason looked at her with a mixture of disgust and sadness. You did it for yourself, Victoria. It was always for you. And I was so stupid, so blind, that I allowed you to humiliate my mother, the woman who raised me alone, who worked until she destroyed her body to give me an education, and I allowed you to treat her like garbage. He turned to me with tears in his eyes. Mom, I raised my hand, stopping him. No, Jason, not now. I do not want to hear empty apologies at this moment. I looked at my son, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in years. I saw the dark circles under his eyes, the stress lines on his forehead, the way his shoulders slumped as if carrying an invisible weight. And I wondered when he had lost his backbone, when he had become someone who allowed his wife to manipulate and control everything. Did you know? I asked him directly. Did you know she was exploiting me? Did you know about her history? Jason shook his head, but there was doubt in his eyes. I did not know about her past, but about how she treated you. I saw things, comments, attitudes, and I did nothing. I convinced myself that you were happy to help, that it was temporary, that when we had the new house, everything would be different. His voice broke. I was a coward. I chose my comfort over your dignity, and I am going to carry that guilt for the rest of my life. Samantha pulled more documents from her briefcase. There is something else you need to know. We all looked at her. During the investigation, Robert discovered that Victoria has significant debts, credit cards, personal loans, all under her name but affecting the marriage's finances. It totals more than $60,000. Jason's jaw dropped. $60,000? What did you spend $60,000 on? Victoria did not answer, but the answer was all over the house. The expensive furniture, the designer clothes, the jewelry, the cars, everything was a facade, an illusion of wealth built on debt and stolen money. Robert added, and there is more. Victoria has a secret bank account in the Cayman Islands. I managed to track a transfer of $30,000 that left Mrs. Margaret's funds and went directly to that account before the rest was invested in the fraudulent company. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Victoria's mother stopped crying, looking at her daughter with total disbelief. Jason stood up slowly, walked toward Victoria, and spoke with a terrifying calm. $30,000 in a secret account, an account I did not know about. An account you were probably going to use to disappear if everything went wrong, right? Victoria backed away. No, it is not like that. That money was for emergencies. To protect us? Yes. Jason interrupted her. Protect us? Or protect yourself while you let me face the legal consequences? He looked at her as if she were a stranger. Did you ever love me? Or was I always just another fool with resources you could exploit? Victoria did not answer, and that lack of an answer was all the response Jason needed. He turned to Samantha. What do I have to do to help my mother? What do I have to do to fix even a fraction of this disaster? Samantha looked at him with cautious approval. First, cooperate completely with the authorities. Second, testify against Victoria if necessary. Third, do everything possible to recover those $30,000 from the offshore account. Victoria's father stood up. I will handle that. I have contacts who can help freeze that account and repatriate the funds. Victoria, I need all the information for that account now. Victoria shook her head. I am not going to incriminate myself further. Her father approached her, and although he did not touch her, his presence was intimidating. Daughter, listen to me very well. You can cooperate now and maybe, just maybe, get a deal with the DA's office. Or you can be stubborn, face the full weight of the law, and lose absolutely everything, including any support this family might offer you. What do you choose? Victoria looked around, looking for some exit, some ally. But everyone, even her mother, looked at her with disappointment and repulsion. Finally, defeated, she whispered, "All right, I will give you the account information." I had been quiet during this whole exchange, watching how the truth unfolded, how the lies were revealed layer by layer. But there was something else I needed to say. Jason, I called for his attention. I want you to know something. I am not doing this for revenge. I am doing this because no elderly person should go through what I went through. Your father worked 40 years to leave me that house. I worked 20 years cleaning offices to help you study. That money represented a lifetime of sacrifice, and your wife treated it like monopoly money. I walked closer to him, looking him directly in the eyes. But more than the money, it hurts me that you saw me suffer and did nothing. It hurts me that you gave me that apron today and laughed, as if humiliating your mother was entertainment. I saw tears rolling down his cheeks. Mom, I am sorry. God, I am so sorry. I shook my head. Apologies come later, Jason. First come actions. Prove to me that you are still the son I raised, the son who has morals and dignity. Help me recover what is mine and ensure that Victoria cannot do this to anyone else. The days that followed that Christmas were a whirlwind of lawyers, statements, and revelations that seemed to have no end. Jason moved out of the house immediately, leaving Victoria alone in that space that had once been her perfect kingdom. He went to a cheap hotel, he told me, because he could not bear to be under the same roof as her for one more minute. I returned to my small apartment, and although it was modest, every night I slept better than in all the time I spent in that house. Because that space was mine, because no one could demand anything from me there, because I had finally recovered my dignity. Samantha worked tirelessly, coordinating with the federal authorities investigating the fraudulent company. Robert continued his investigation and discovered something we had not even anticipated. Victoria not only had 2 known victims, but at least 5 more. All were elderly people. All had trusted her in some way, whether as a daughter-in-law, as a family friend, or as an unofficial financial advisor. One of those victims was a 74-year-old man named Frank, who had met Victoria at a charity event 3 years ago. She had convinced him to invest his retirement savings in an import business that, of course, never existed. Frank lost $45,000 and almost lost his house when he could not pay the mortgage. He never reported it because Victoria told him if he spoke, she would sue him for defamation and he would lose everything. Another victim was a widow named Antonia, who had been a co-worker of Victoria's mother years ago. Victoria borrowed money from her supposedly to pay for a medical emergency for her father. $20,000, which she never returned. When Antonia asked for the money, Victoria blocked her everywhere and disappeared from her life. Robert found these people one by one, documented their cases, recorded their testimonies. Each story was a reflection of mine, a pattern of manipulation, empty promises, and calculated exploitation. The DA's office was building a solid case. It was not just my word against Victoria's. It was a documented pattern of criminal behavior spanning years. The prosecutor assigned to the case, a young but competent man named Joseph Miller, visited me in my apartment one afternoon. Mrs. Margaret, I want you to know that we are going to prosecute this case with the full force of the law. What Mrs. Victoria did is not only morally reprehensible, it is criminally punishable. We have sufficient evidence to file charges for fraud, theft, misappropriation, and conspiracy. I sat across from him, processing his words. What does that mean in real terms? Joseph opened his portfolio. It means that if found guilty on all charges, Victoria could face between 15 and 25 years in prison. And considering there are multiple victims and an established pattern, the judge will likely not be lenient. 25 years. That figure resonated in my head. Victoria was 35 years old. She could leave prison as an old woman. If she ever left, part of me felt something akin to satisfaction. But another part, the part that was still a mother and understood the pain of losing someone, felt a deep sadness. Not for Victoria, but for her parents, especially for her mother, who seemed to have aged 10 years in a matter of days. I had seen her at one of the preliminary hearings, sitting in the back of the courtroom, crying silently while her daughter was processed. After that hearing, Victoria's mother looked for me in the hallway. She looked destroyed, with deep dark circles and trembling hands. "Mrs. Margaret, I do not know what to say. I have no words to express how sorry I am." I looked at her, seeing my own pain reflected in her eyes. "You are not to blame for what your daughter did." She shook her head. "Maybe not directly, but we did something wrong raising her. We failed somewhere as parents for her to become this." She sighed deeply. "My husband and I have talked. We are going to sell our beach house, a property we held as an investment. We want to help compensate Victoria's victims, including you." Her words surprised me. "You do not have to do that." She took my hands in hers. "Yes, we have to do it. Not out of legal obligation, but out of moral obligation. Victoria used the values we taught her, the education we gave her, the connections we provided, to destroy lives. As her parents, we feel we have a responsibility to repair even a small part of the damage." I felt tears in my eyes. "Thank you." It was all I could say. 2 weeks later, Victoria's parents indeed sold their property. From the money obtained, they gave me $310,000, $10,000 more than what I had initially lost. They also partially compensated the other victims, according to their losses. It was not enough to cover all the damage, but it was a gesture that meant more than they probably understood. It showed me that there were still decent people in the world, people who took responsibility even when it was not legally necessary. Meanwhile, Jason had become a different man. He collaborated completely with the authorities, providing access to all joint bank accounts, all documents, all emails. He testified before the grand jury, telling them how Victoria had manipulated him, how she had handled all finances without giving him details, how he had signed documents without reading because he trusted her. His testimony was crucial. It established that he had been, in many ways, another victim of Victoria, although his victimization did not excuse the fact that he had allowed my abuse. The DA's office decided not to press criminal charges against Jason due to his cooperation, but it was clear his life was ruined in other ways. He lost his job when his employers learned of the scandal. His reputation in the financial industry, where he worked as an accountant, was destroyed. Nobody wanted to hire the man whose wife had scammed elderly people, including his own mother. One afternoon, Jason appeared at my apartment without warning. He looked terrible, with wrinkled clothes and a beard of several days. "Mom, can I come in?" I hesitated for a moment, but finally opened the door. We sat in my small living room, with an uncomfortable silence between us. "I do not know where to start," he said finally. "I have been going to therapy, trying to understand how I reached this point, how I allowed all this to happen." I looked at him without saying anything, waiting. "The therapist says Victoria exhibited behaviors of a narcissistic personality, that she gradually isolated me from you, from my friends, until only her voice remained in my head, telling me what to think, what to do." He paused. "But that does not excuse me, Mom. I saw your suffering. I saw how she treated you, and I chose not to see, because it was easier, because confronting her meant admitting my marriage was a lie." Jason began to cry. Not the superficial crying of someone seeking pity, but the deep crying of someone finally facing the magnitude of his mistakes. "I failed you in every way possible. I failed as a son, as a human being. I allowed them to humiliate you in your own face, to steal the fruit of a lifetime of work. And the worst is that on Christmas Day, when I gave you that apron and laughed, a part of me knew it was wrong, but I did it anyway because Victoria expected me to do it." He covered his face with his hands. "How can you even look at me? How can you be in the same room as me after what I did to you?" I let him cry. I did not console him. I did not tell him everything was fine, because it was not fine. Nothing was fine. But when his sobs finally calmed down, I spoke. "Jason, I am not going to tell you I forgive you, because forgiveness is not something given easily after such trauma. But I am going to tell you this. The fact that you are here, facing what you did, going to therapy, cooperating with the authorities, that counts for something. I leaned forward, looking him directly in the eye. Your father was a good man, Jason. Not perfect, but good. He raised you with values, with principles. I know those values are still there inside you, buried under years of manipulation and bad decisions. The question is not if I can forgive you now. The question is if you can forgive yourself and become the man you should have been. Jason nodded slowly. I am going to spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Mom, somehow, some way, I am going to fix this. I stood up. Then start by doing the right thing at the trial. Testify with the complete truth. Help ensure Victoria can never do this to anyone else ever again. That is your first chance at redemption. Jason stood up too, wiping his tears. I will. I promise you. When he left, I stayed sitting in my apartment, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. I had recovered my money thanks to Victoria's parents. I had recovered my dignity by unmasking my abuser. But I had lost something too. The illusion of the perfect family. The image of my son as the man I thought he was. Victoria's trial began 6 months after that Christmas. The courtroom was full of people who wanted to witness the fall of someone who had built an entire life on lies and manipulation. I was there, in the first row, along with the other victims Robert had found. Frank, Antonia, and 3 other people, whose names and faces I now knew well. We had become something like a strange family, united by the common pain of having been betrayed by the same predator. Victoria entered the room handcuffed, dressed in a simple suit that contrasted dramatically with the designer clothes she used to wear. She looked gaunt, smaller than I remembered. Her eyes sought her mother in the audience, but the lady had lowered her gaze, unable to face what her daughter had become. Victoria's father was there too, with a stern expression, keeping his word not to interfere with justice. The prosecutor, an experienced woman named Patricia Ramirez, presented the case with surgical precision. Document after document, testimony after testimony, she built a devastating portrait of Victoria as a calculating con artist who had perfected the art of identifying and exploiting vulnerable people. She showed emails where Victoria discussed strategies to gain her victims' trust. She presented forensic evidence of the bank transfers, money flowing from the accounts of innocent seniors to fraudulent investments, and the secret account in the Cayman Islands. When it was my turn to testify, I took the stand with trembling legs, but with my head held high. The prosecutor guided me through my story, the sale of my house, the broken promises, the months of servitude disguised as family help, the Christmas apron that symbolized years of humiliation condensed into a single cruel gift. I spoke for almost 2 hours, and by the time I finished, several jury members had tears in their eyes. Then came Jason's turn. My son took the stand looking years older than his 42 years. Victoria's defense attorney tried to paint him as the real villain, the ungrateful son who had orchestrated everything. But Jason did not defend himself by hiding behind excuses. He admitted his complicity, his cowardice, his conscious choice to ignore my suffering because confronting the truth was too uncomfortable. I loved Victoria, he said with a broken voice, or at least I loved the idea of her, and that love blinded me to the point of betraying the person who loved me most in this world, my mother. He looked directly at Victoria when he spoke, but now I see who you really are, not the beautiful and sophisticated woman I thought I had met. I see a predator who identified my insecurities, my desire to belong to a more elegant world, and used it to manipulate me. That does not excuse me, but it explains how a good person can do terrible things. Jason's testimony was crucial because it established the pattern of manipulation Victoria used, how she identified people's emotional weaknesses and exploited them without mercy. Frank testified about how Victoria had found him at his most vulnerable moment, 6 months after his wife died of cancer. Antonia spoke of how Victoria had faked friendship for years, building trust, only to destroy it with an elaborate lie about a fake medical emergency. One by one, the victims told similar stories. Identification of vulnerability, building of trust, ruthless exploitation. Victoria's defense lawyer tried to argue that she was also a victim, that she had grown up with pressure to keep up appearances, that she suffered from undiagnosed mental health issues. They brought in psychologists who spoke of personality disorders, of childhood trauma, but the prosecutor dismantled every argument with cold, hard evidence. The emails where Victoria celebrated her conquests, the secret bank accounts, the pattern of behavior stretching over more than a decade. This was not the result of mental illness or mitigating circumstances. It was deliberate and sustained criminality. When Victoria finally took the stand in her own defense, it was a disaster. Her lawyer probably advised her to show remorse, to cry, to seem repentant. But Victoria could not maintain the act. Under the prosecutor's cross-examination, her mask cracked again. When asked about the emails referring to elderly people as easy targets, she tried to explain it was just a figure of speech, that she did not mean it seriously. When confronted with the testimony of multiple victims, she said they were all exaggerating, that they had misinterpreted her intentions. And when the prosecutor asked her directly, "Do you feel any remorse for what you did to these people?" Victoria hesitated too long before answering. "Of course I feel it. I regret that things turned out this way." It was not true remorse. It was regret for having been caught. The jury saw it. I saw it. Everyone in that room saw it. Deliberations lasted only 6 hours. When the jury returned, the foreman stood up and read the verdict. Guilty on all charges: fraud, misappropriation, conspiracy, aggravated theft, elder financial abuse. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Victoria slumped in her chair. Her mother sobbed loudly. Her father remained motionless, stone-faced. And I felt something I did not expect, not triumph or vengeful joy, but a deep relief. Relief because finally there was justice. Relief because Victoria could not do this to anyone else. Relief because my story, and the stories of all her victims, had been heard and validated. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge, an older woman of about 60, who reminded me of some of the women I had worked with cleaning offices, looked at Victoria with a mixture of contempt and sadness. "Mrs. Victoria Reynolds, you have been found guilty of crimes that go beyond simple theft. You systematically identified people in their most vulnerable moments, elderly people who deserved respect and care, and exploited them without mercy. You used your intelligence, your charm, and your social standing to destroy lives." The judge continued. "I have read all the testimonies. I have seen all the evidence. And what disturbs me most is not just what you did, but the complete lack of genuine remorse. Even now, in your testimony, you tried to justify your actions, blame others, minimize the damage you caused. That tells me that if you were released today, you would do exactly the same thing again." She paused, letting her words resonate in the silent room. Therefore, taking into account the severity of the crimes, the number of victims, the extended pattern of criminal behavior, and your lack of remorse, I sentence you to 22 years in prison without the possibility of parole for the first 10 years. The gavel fell. 22 years. Victoria was 35. She would get out, if she got out with good behavior, at 57. All her youth, all her productive adult life, spent behind bars. I saw her being escorted out of the room, and in that final moment, our eyes met. There was no longer arrogance in her eyes, nor that superiority she had always projected. There was only defeat and the slow realization that she had destroyed her own life along with those of her victims. After the trial, the other victims and I gathered outside the courthouse. Frank hugged me. This 74-year-old man who had lost his savings but recovered his voice. "Thank you, Mrs. Margaret. Without your courage to report this, none of us would have gotten justice." Antonia took my hand. "You gave us hope that there are still consequences for bad people." I smiled, feeling the weight of the last few months finally lift off my shoulders. It was not just me, it was all of us together, and good people like Samantha and Robert who believed in us. Jason appeared then, keeping his distance, unsure if he had the right to approach. I looked at him for a long moment. I was still angry with him. I probably would be for a long time. But I also saw something new in his eyes. Genuine humility, real shame, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of redemption. I signaled him to come closer. When he reached my side, I told him quietly, "This does not mean everything is forgiven, but it means I am willing to give you the chance to prove who you really are." The following months were about rebuilding. With the money, Victoria's parents returned to me, plus additional compensation from the state victim compensation program. I had enough not only to live comfortably, but to help some of the other victims who had not been as lucky. Frank was able to save his house. Antonia could pay for medical treatment she had been postponing. I used part of the money to establish a small fund, working with Samantha, to help other elderly people facing financial abuse, but without resources to hire lawyers. Jason eventually found a modest job as an accountant at a small firm, willing to give him a second chance. He divorced Victoria, a process that was surprisingly simple given she was in prison and had much bigger problems to worry about. He started visiting me once a week, not to ask for forgiveness constantly, but simply to be present, help with repairs in my apartment, or just share a coffee in silence. Slowly, very slowly, we began to rebuild something that maybe one day could resemble a mother-son relationship. A year after the trial, at Christmas again, I organized a small dinner in my apartment. I invited Frank, Antonia, the other victims, Samantha and Robert, and even Jason. My small space was full of people, laughter, shared stories. I prepared simple food, but made with love, not the elaborate menus Victoria forced me to make, but the comforting dishes I enjoyed cooking. While everyone ate and chatted, I stood for a moment in my small kitchen, looking at this improvised family that trauma had given us, and I realized something important. Victoria had taken my house, my money, almost took my dignity. But she could not take what truly mattered. She could not take my strength, my ability to fight, my refusal to be invisible. And she definitely could not take the most important lesson I now wanted to share with the world. Samantha convinced me to tell my story publicly. We did interviews with local media, spoke at senior centers, worked with organizations fighting elder abuse, and every time I told my story, I saw recognition in the eyes of someone in the audience. Someone going through something similar. Someone who thought they were alone. Someone needing to hear that it is okay to defend yourself, that it is okay to say no, that it is okay to demand respect regardless of your age. My message was simple but powerful. Never allow love, fear, or manipulation to make you forget your worth. You are worthy of respect. Your sacrifices mean something. And if someone, even family, treats you as less than human, you have the right to defend yourself. You have the right to seek justice. It is never too late to recover your dignity. And every time I gave this message, I thought of that ugly gray apron, of my son's cruel laugh, of that moment at Christmas when everything changed. I thought about how a single moment of courage, a single act of refusing to be invisible, had transformed not only my life, but the lives of many other people. That Christmas, when they gave me that apron, they thought they were putting me in my place. What they did not know is that they were giving me exactly the motivation I needed to find my true place, standing tall, with dignity, demanding justice, and in the end, that was the best gift I could have given myself.